fourth grade, put your seatbelts on, because the time machine is a rough ride, especially with the chapter we're about to get into. In fact, a lot of the chapters we've gotten into in this history book have been depressing, and today we're reading about the Great Depression. Chapter 10. So, if you'll join me, we're going to be reading page 234 to 239. Really, 234 is just a picture, but it does say on it, Focus, Fighting the Great Depression Altered American Government. So, we are going to be mainly in the 30s, although I believe the stock market crash, as we talked about, was in 1929. So let's see where we go here. So jump to page 235. The Great Depression. Americans knew about stock market crashes and depressions. These downfalls in the economy had happened before, and in 1901 the stock market crashed. A year later, the American government began to slow down. The American economy began to slow down and remained slow for 2 years. In 1907, a panic led to stocks falling and banks failing, and the 1920s began with a year-long depression. These crashes, panics, and depressions were often short, but they could be painful. Somehow the economy always recovered, and it always continued to grow again. Stock market crash. The crash on Black Tuesday in 1929 was the biggest crash in American history. But Americans had many reasons for thinking about their economy. Americans had many reasons for thinking their economy would be growing. Many new inventions were being sold at this time, and the companies that assembled the inventions made money. Inventions that produced and conveyed electricity sold well. In the 1920s, electricity became available in many American homes, and a person who had electricity at home would buy other appliances that also used electricity, such as refrigerators and toasters. Many homes were still without electricity, though. This meant that there was opportunities for power companies and refrigerator companies to grow. People could buy stock in those companies, and their money would help fund the companies to build more products to sell. In return, the owners of the stock would share some of these companies' wealth. But the owners would only get money back if the company succeeded. No one knew which companies would succeed, and no one knew when the growth would come. This risk is part of the reason why stock prices went up and down. During the 1920s, stock prices mostly went up. This rise in prices led some people to speculate on the stock market. Speculating meant that people bought stocks and then sold them as soon as the price went up. These people were not trying to make wise investments, they were trying to get money quick. Sometimes people speculated with borrowed money, and these people were in trouble when the market crashed. Now the stock was worth less than what they had paid for, and they did not have the money to pay back their debt. The stock market suffered from another problem. Companies that sold stock often withheld information about their company. People who bought stocks needed this information to make wise investments. And sometimes people in the company took advantage of the information that no one else knew. They could make money because they knew things others did not, and this type of investment was not just. Problems with the stock market were part of the reasons for the great crash on Black Tuesday. But these problems were not the main reason for the crash. Many things worked together to bring about the stock market crash of 1929. So understanding the stock market, I'm just going to read that real quick. Have you heard someone say that stocks closed higher or lower? People invest money in stocks from companies hoping that they will make money. Newspapers and news programs give daily information on how stocks are performing. You will learn how to track how a stock is performing. I don't think we will learn how to track a stock that's performing, but I don't know what the activity there is exactly, but anyway, one easy way to explain this, I think, is let's say it it was announced that, this is after the Nintendo Wii and the Nintendo Wii U, there was a little bit of information that they were going to have a new console called the Nintendo Switch. And you decided, you know what, I think a lot of people are going to buy that system, so I'm going to invest a couple $100 in Nintendo stock. And I'm going to hope that the system sells well, because if it sells well and Nintendo makes a bunch of money, then I will make money on my investment. So you invest a little money hoping that the company does well, and then they end up selling a whole lot of their system. They make money, and in return, you make money. But it can also happen the opposite. People try to guess, oh, this company's doing this, and I think they're going to make a lot of money. I think it's a great idea. I'm going to invest some money. And all of a sudden, you bought stocks, and let's say they were $100 a share, and you bought 5 of them. Well, that company's invention did not do well. People did not buy it. They were not interested in it, and the company lost millions of dollars. Well, all of a sudden, your stock shares that you bought for $100 a piece are now worth $10 a piece. So you can only sell all 5 of them for $50, but you spent $500 to get them. That is how the stock market works. You're kind of playing by variables and guesses and doing the best with the information. That's why it's not fair when people have insider information, meaning, let's say somebody who did work at Nintendo knows that there's, millions of pre-orders, so they know the system is going to do well, and they decide to invest in Nintendo. It's not fair that they had information that no one else did from working on the inside or from getting information from inside the company. And that is not, it's just not right. Okay, so page 238. Responses to the crash of 1929. Americans did not expect the crash of 1929 to lead to a Great Depression. A crash meant that stocks quickly lost more than half of their value, and stock market prices had risen higher than the companies were worth. A crash was simply bringing the market back to reality. As companies continued to grow, the prices would slowly rise again, and this is what happened after the crash in 1929. No company caved in. No bank failed immediately after. The stock market began to rise again, and most Americans did not own stock, but for many people, life changed drastically and suddenly. Many people incorrectly think that the crash of 1929 caused the Great Depression, but many things happened to bring about the Great Depression. The stock market crash was only one of the causes. The stock market crash did show that the U.S. economy was already struggling. Congress decided that they needed to protect U.S. businesses. They passed the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act. A tariff is a tax on goods that are shipped into a country. So the Smoot-Hawley tariff was one of the highest ever passed. This tax might have sounded good to the protected businesses, but it caused prices to go up for many Americans. Other countries also raised tariffs on American-made goods, hurting American businesses that sold their goods overseas. Many of the foreign nations owed the United States money, and they had borrowed money during World War I, but their economies were having trouble too. Many of them were not able to pay the United States the money that they owed. The United States needed money, so not getting paid hurt. Bank runs. Also, some banks ran out of money. People put their money in banks for safekeeping, but a bank does not keep all the money locked up in safe. Banks know all depositors do not usually withdraw all their money from the bank at the same time. So the bank lends the deposited money to other people. These people pay the loan back with interest, and they have to pay the bank the amount of money they borrowed plus some extra. This system is one way that banks make money. But if borrowers do not repay their loans, a bank can run out of money and fail. When one bank is in danger of failing, concerned people might rush to the bank to withdraw their money. When many people do this at the same time, the action is called a bank run, and as a result, the bank loses more money and it can fail. Most banks in the United States at this time were small banks. But in December of 1930, the Bank of the United States failed. This was a large bank. Other large banks could have loaned it money to help keep it from failing, but they chose not to. Now that a big bank had failed, people were very worried about keeping their money in banks. Because of its name, some people thought the Bank of the United States was owned by the United States government, but it was not. All right, that was today's reading on the Great Depression, and we are going to be doing workbook pages 107 and 108. So go ahead and get your workbook out and come back and join me when you're ready to rock and roll. All right, so page 107 or 108, not or, and 108 in our history workbook. So 107, this is a book page that you're just reading. There's no assignment on it, but you do need to read it. And you're going to learn more about this subject of stocks, and you get to see what a stock certificate actually looks like. But 108 is where the meat is at. So 108, all you're going to do is based on the five or six pages we read together, you're going to fill out the information here on 1 through 12. Okay? The first section is just writing the answer that completes the sentence. And then the second part, our famous history part, write true if the statement is true, and if the statement is false, you do what? You write the correction for the underlined word. And no, they're not all true. So don't put true for all of them. And then the last part is just explain why Americans thought the economy would keep growing after Black Tuesday, and explain how banks run out of money. Okay? Always with history, as long as you're in the ballpark, I give you credit if you show that you have some understanding of the material. Don't just make stuff up, But there's, probably more than one acceptable answer for those two, if you are worried. Okay, so go ahead and do that, and then come back to the video when you're done so that we can discuss what you've done, okay? Do not come back to the video until you've done the paper, and make sure you're marking what you get wrong when we go over it, okay? All right, I'll see you in a minute. All right, through the magic of video, for you it's now been probably 10 or 15 minutes, and for me it's been about 3 seconds. Longest 3 seconds of my life. Page 108. So, write the answer that completes each sentence. The biggest stock market crash in American history happened in, it wants to know the date, not I wish they would have specified that, but the year that this happened was, what was the year that we were talking about today mostly? 1929. Yep. Number 2, some people would blank on the stock market by buying stocks and then selling them as soon as the price went up. The word that they wanted here was actually a bold term. It was kind of a strange bold term because I felt like they made it bold, but they didn't really talk about what it meant. And that word is speculate. Basically, it's making an educated guess. They would guess about what the stock market was going to do. So speculate is the word. And again, you can find that in your reading. It's a bold term, so look for the bold term if you need help with spelling. Number 3, the stock market crash was only one of many things that happened to bring out the what. We're talking about what happened after the crash. This is like the main title of this section. The Great Depression. Yeah, the Great Depression. Now, Great Depression, that is capitalized. Okay? It's a proper noun, believe it or not. Number 4, to protect U.S. businesses, Congress passed the Smoot-Hawley what? Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act. Tariff Act. And number 5, when people make a rush to the bank to withdraw their money, the action is called what? This was actually the heading of, I think, the last little part we read. And it's called a bank run. A bank run. Alright, true and false section. Number 6. the money to build more products. Yep, the money to build more products to sell came from people who bought stock in companies. That's true. That is true. Number 7, companies that sold stock often withheld profits from people who bought stocks. No, this is when we were talking about, well, I refer to it as its proper name, insider trading. So companies that sold stocks often withheld information from people who bought stocks. Okay, so yeah, this wasn't the insider trading. This is basically, you're a company and you know your stocks aren't going to do well, but you're making it seem like they will, so people will buy them. So you're withholding information that you know that would probably lead them to believe it wouldn't be a wise investment, but you don't tell them because you still want them to buy your stock. Shady. Number 8, the stock market crash showed that the U.S. banking system was struggling. If you put true, I can understand why. The answer here, though, is the stock market crash showed that the U.S. economy was struggling. The crash helped lead to the banking system struggling, but the stock market showed that the economy was struggling. Number 9, people who borrow money from a bank must pay the loan back with interest. That's true, and we've talked about interest before. Remember, Emma tells me she really wants 50 cents for the vending machine, and I go, look, I'll give you 50 cents, but tomorrow you have to give me 75 cents in return. Interest, you have to pay me back a little extra than you borrowed if you want to borrow money from me. It's kind of rude, but that's the way it works. Number 10, the Bank of the United States. The Bank of the United States was owned by the United States government. Yeah, one of the last things we talked about in that chapter is that is what people thought, but it was not true. It was not owned by the United States government. It was just its name. Probably like the way we have Bank of America now. It doesn't mean that it's America's bank, that they own it. It's just the name of the bank. Alright, number 11. Let's see where you landed on this. Explain why Americans thought the economy would keep growing after Black Tuesday. Well, it was because new inventions were being sold at this time, and the companies that assembled the inventions made money, and electricity became available. I would also... Phone ran out of space. Okay. I would also accept the answer, and I'm surprised they didn't put this in here because they talked about it, the idea that crashes had happened before and we always recovered. So that could also be why they thought the economy would continue growing after this, because it had happened before. It just hadn't happened like this. And explain how banks run out of money. Banks lend the money that has been deposited to other people, and those people pay the loans back with interest, but if all the depositors want their money back at the same time, or if people do not pay their loans back, a bank can run out of money. If you have anything like that, you're fine, and it's correct. If you didn't get anything like that, either rewatch that, because I know I said it fast, or go back in your book where it was talking about bank runs. All of the information is in there, and choose an answer for that one, and you should be fine. Okay? It's a very simple concept once you read it a few times and you decipher it in your mind. Alright, that's it for history. Page 107 and 108 is completed, and I will see you in the next lesson.